we start part 2 of our look at religions by focusing on Hinduism. Hinduism is a Vedic faith. It is a faith that is based on about 2,500 years of different scriptures, different stories, different cultures. The Vedas are the ancient Sanskrit hymns and philosophies, the guidance that provides a way of life. Today, Hinduism is the religion for about 900 million people, and the Indian subcontinent is really home to the Hindu faith. It's the largest ethnic religion in the world, again, meaning individuals are born into this religion. We don't see individuals moving into Hinduism. Based on its age, based on its background, there are many traditions with Hinduism. There's not a single founding person. There's not a single author of the Vedas. So when we look at our Semitic faiths like Islam, like Christianity, we could tie it to some key individual people. The date and the background and the complexities of Hinduism don't provide that single source. The key element of Hinduism is known as Sanatana Dharma, which means the internal truth. And Hinduism believes in this idea of reincarnation, that we live in this perpetual cycle of life and death, and that karma, our actions, our deeds, our thoughts, lead to rebirth. And the concept of moksha looks at ending the cycle of life and death and reaching that state of bliss. So while individuals are judged on their actions and thoughts in their current life, the idea is to live life in such a manner that you are released from this cycle of life and death. The Hindu faith also has a major pilgrimage known as the Kumbh Mela, which literally translates to Kumbh is pot, and it's pot fair. This idea that Vishnu, one of the Hindu gods, spilled some immortality in different spots of the South Asian peninsula, and individuals, over 100 million individuals, as part of the largest pilgrimage of the world, will go, in this case, to the Ganges River and clean their souls with some of that water that was spilt thousands of years ago by Vishnu. One of the constraining aspects, often seen as a negative aspect, of the Hindu faith is known as the caste system. And within the caste system we have varnas, or classes. And historically, there's been very little movement between classes. So if you're married into the Brahmins, then your life is so that you have many more opportunities for success, both academic, family, career. As you move down the caste system, as you move towards the base of the triangle, your opportunities are more limited, your wealth is more limited, there isn't as much movement going up the hierarchy. The group at the bottom, known as the Dalits, these are the untouchables. These are the individuals that fall out of the caste system. What we're seeing is that the life that they're pursuing through the Hindu faith is so limiting that many of our Dalits are actually converting to Buddhism, another Asian religion based on some of the same shared concepts that isn't quite as confining, that isn't as limiting for those at the bottom of the Hindu faith. And that segues us into the Buddhist faith. Buddhism has about 500 million people worldwide, most of them focused in East Asia and Southeast Asia. Buddhism is a 6th century extension of Hinduism. Buddha, which literally means the enlightened one, was a Hindu prince from northeast India, and he saw both his family's wealth and also outside degradation. So as he began to become a missionary, as he began to spread his philosophy, he began to see that the constraints of Hinduism weren't benefiting many people. So Buddha wanted to pursue similar aspects of Hinduism in a more open way, in a more inviting way. He believed, much like Hindus, that desire equals misery, and that if we could eliminate our earthly desires, we could reach nirvana. If we could eliminate our earthly desires, we could reach an enlightened state. Buddha's writings are noted in the Tripitaka. That is the sacred book of the Buddhist faith. When we look at where Buddhism is concentrated, we see, again, this image on your screen of East Asia. When we look into Southeast Asia, we see our most traditional way of practicing the faith, the most disciplined way, in countries like Burma and Thailand and Cambodia. In places like Tibet and Mongolia, we actually see a syncretic version of Buddhism. Because of communist oppression, Buddhists weren't able to freely practice their faith like they could in other countries. So as a result of communist oppression, as a result of mixing in local beliefs, we see that the areas highlighted here in orange practice a different form of Buddhism than we would find in China, or much of China, and also Southeast Asia. Again, Southeast Asia is a little more disciplined. We're going to wrap up our look at religions by focusing on contested spaces. And again, religion has a number of symbols. It also has physical space. And there are parts of the world where this physical space is shared by different groups. That idea of space and place. The space is the same, but the place, the meaning for those groups differs, ranges widely in some cases. And a prime example of contested spaces is Jerusalem. And the map on your screen is of Old City Jerusalem. And this city is quartered. There are walled quarters in the city that reflect the contested space and the 4 different groups that are vying for control of their spaces. When we look at Old City Jerusalem, we see these 3 Semitic faiths are heavily pronounced. The Temple Mount, which is in green on the right side of the map, is the most highly contested space. This space today is dominated by Muslims, but going back to the 6th century BCE, this area has held a strong Jewish connotation. A lot of meaning, a lot of history, a lot of identification of the Jewish community lies in this now dominated Muslim quarter. As you navigate your way through this city, through this contested space, it's not just a map that shows you 4 color-coded areas. There are a number of physical barriers, there are a number of checkpoints, there is a military presence. So this space is contested, not only in religion, not only in identification, but there are security concerns and measures as well. The first area that we're going to look at is the Jewish quarter. The Jewish faith is the oldest of these, and it's been in Jerusalem for the longest. And the Jewish quarter, again, is based on the Temple Mount and this idea of the foundation stone. This foundation stone is the holiest of holies. This is the axis of heaven and earth, and this is where Solomon's temple stood for 400 years until it was destroyed in 586-587 BC by the Babylonians. So again, about 70 years after the fall of Solomon's temple, the Jews began to build the second temple on Temple Mount, and that stood in place until 70 AD when the Romans conquered and destroyed the second temple. In the southwest corner of Temple Mount, on the eastern side of the Jewish quarter, is what's known as the Western Wall, known to outsiders as the Wailing Wall. This wall is part of the original foundation of Solomon's temple, and it is an incredibly holy place where Jews practice daily prayer today. When we look at this group, the Jewish quarter, we're looking at only about 8% of the population is Jewish in Old City Jerusalem. The city itself has a population of 37,000, but again, only about 8% of the Old City population is Jewish. Our second quarter is the Armenian quarter, and this is the second oldest quarter in Jerusalem today. This has been in existence since the 4th century. This quarter reflects an early Armenian diaspora, where the Armenian Catholics were removed from their country and as they were forced out, they settled in Jerusalem. They settled in the Holy Land. And the key spot in the Armenian corner is St. James Monastery. And the image on the bottom left is from inside St. James Monastery. And you could see how the Armenian form of Christianity, this Eastern form of Christianity, brings with it different symbols and different sorts of mysticism, as you could see these hanging lanterns in the church. So the Armenian quarter is a very strong quarter. It has a very strong identity, very insular, but it only consists of about 2% of Old City Jerusalem's population. In recent decades, Armenians have been leaving Jerusalem and going elsewhere. So the Armenian quarter, while it is very strong, has very strong identity, very insular, it faces an uncertain future. Our third quarter is the Christian quarter. And the Christian quarter is home to the Holy Sepulchre. And the Holy Sepulchre is the tomb where Jesus was buried and was resurrected. Sepulchre is a word that means tomb that is carved into rock. So this Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the most important Christian site here in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the city of the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So you could understand how the 2.3 billion Christians around the world hold a very strong affiliation with this part of Jerusalem. And while the Christians have a pretty secure quarter, when we look at the Muslims, the Jews, and the Armenians, it's also noted that inter-Christian quarreling takes place here, meaning that we have Greeks, we have Greek Orthodox, we have Eastern Orthodox, we have Christian sects, Catholic sects that are all competing for space within this Christian quarter. As the Christian faith continues to expand, different identities evolve within the Christian faith that hold a very strong allegiance to this part of Old City Jerusalem. And our final quarter is the Muslim quarter. And the Muslim quarter is home to Dome of the Rock. Dome of the Rock is the site of Muhammad's ascension, and this is the third holiest site in the Muslim faith. The Dome of the Rock, and Al-Aqsa Mosque are the final days of Muhammad. The final moments of his life were held right here in Jerusalem. So when we look at the importance of this small city, we could see these four groups are competing heavily for this space, particularly the competition in the Jewish quarter trying to reclaim or trying to maintain a strong hold on its small remaining part of the Temple Mount. And this image here shows us the Temple Mount in Old City Jerusalem. The gold dome is the Dome of the Rock, and then you can see just below that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Down on the bottom left corner is the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. That's the corner of Solomon's ancient temple that remains a very important site for the Jewish faith. So this will wrap up our look at religions. Again, we focused on the Semitic faiths and the religions of Asia, and then wrapped up by focusing on contested spaces. Again, the importance of religion and who we are, forming our worldview, becoming a large part of our identity. And many times we place our identity in our community in spaces that are also claimed by others.